Okay, good morning or good afternoon, good evening, everyone, depending on where you are. I'm very happy to welcome you to our joint event, which is the joint event of SOAS University of London, of the IFCLS of SOAS University of London, and the program Environment and Rural Development, Programa de Pós-Graduaçao, Meio, Ambiente e Desenvolvimento Rural of the University of Brasília. We're very happy to have our three speakers here, and the topic today is persistent contradictions, agribusiness and family agriculture in Brazil and China. My name is Jörg Nowak. I'm also from the Department of or Postgraduate Program of Environment and Rural Development of University of Brasília. I will chair this session. So we will have, every speaker will talk 15 minutes, and then we will have enough time for a debate. So we will talk a bit about the issues, comparing a bit between Brazil and China, issues of concentration of land, commercial agriculture and peasant agriculture. How do these segments relate to each other? And then also Tomaz will kind of connect the two countries with this talk and talk about the relation of Chinese capital with agribusiness in Brazil, and also how these companies relate to the Chinese state. Yeah, so I think we will have a great panorama. We will have Huang Yu speaking from the School of Ethnology and Sociology from Minzu University of China. Then we will have Tomaz Mefano, who's lecturer in international development at SOAS University of London. And at last but not least, we will have Sérgio Sauer from the University of Brasília from our program Mader, Environment and Rural Development. And yeah, thanks a lot for everyone who's like participating online, and mostly also to the speakers to be ready and available to speak and share their research results. So we're going to start with a talk of Huang Yu, who will talk about overcoming the plight of small peasants, 2 cases of eco-socialism in China. So stage is yours, Huang Yu.
Okay. Okay, can you see my screen now? Should be working, right? Okay. Good evening. My name is Huang Yu from the Minzu University of China. Today, my recent research on 2 cases of collective economy in China. So first, I want to argue against the romance of small peasants. In a recent book, Yang Dawa coined the term new peasantries. He argued that family farmers do simple reproduction, and they farm in ways that are socially equitable and environmentally friendly. Similarly, Philip Huang, when studying Chinese agriculture, argued that family farming for cash crop production can be categorized as capitalization without proletarianization. So the assumption for these 2 scholars is that small peasants are advantageous to both large-scale corporate farms and also to socialist collective farms. However, is land dispossession the only indicator of agricultural capitalization? If we look at the case in China, we go through different round of collectivization and decollectivization. From the 1950s to 70s, we experienced agricultural collectivization. Then people's tenure was terminated by the mid-1980s, returning back to household farming. So soon we saw the surge of migrant workers due to the decline of farm income. Then in late 90s, a village cadre wrote a letter to Premier Wen Jiabao stating that we are experiencing rural problems in 3 dimensions. That is, peasants are so bitter, villages are so poor, and agriculture is so dangerous. Then after the mid-2000s, there is a growing trend of re-collectivization in the countryside. So adopting a framework of eco-Marxism, this talk explores how peasants want to decollectivize to achieve social and ecological sustainability. Next, I will give you a brief introduction of the theory of ecological Marxism. So John Bellamy Foster borrowed from Marx's term metabolic rift by showing how the separation between town and countryside led to the breakdown of nutrient cycle, causing soil erosion. Ted Benton coined the term intentional structure to show the different labor process in different industries. If we look at B, eco-regulation, that is the labor transforming process for agriculture. He argues that the uncertainty of nature cannot be overcome by human manipulation alone. So Henry Bernstein applied these concepts of eco-Marxism to agrarian change. So he shifted the term metabolic rift into the term agricultural sector in modern capitalist economies. He shows how agribusinesses dominated the upstream of inputs and downstream of marketing, processing, and distribution, exploiting peasants. And also for eco-regulation, he discussed the obstacles to capitalist farming. Farming confronts the uncertainties of natural environments and ecological process. And also because production time exceeds labor time, therefore, agribusinesses might only want to monopolize the downstream and upstream sectors while leaving production to family farms. Next, I will discuss two cases of eco-socialism in the People's Commune. First, overcoming the metabolic rift. In the People's Commune, we had planned economy, that is a way of decommodification. Grain was mainly used for peasant consumption, not for sale. And also the state in supervising the pastoralist, they planned the grazing area rotation for nomadic herding. Also, the commune was responsible for construction of agricultural infrastructure. They provide science extension services. And also the commune forged a kind of worker-peasant alliance for fair exchange between industry and agriculture. So at this time, agricultural inputs were received as public goods rather than high-priced commodities. Also, the commune adhered to the rule of eco-regulation, as farmers were encouraged to devise agronomic strategies that adapted to local conditions. However, in the reform era, we saw the plight of small peasants. There is a resurgence of metabolic rift when worker-peasant alliance gave way to the domination of agribusiness over peasants. I will skip this. And my research showed that for shrimp farmers, for 50 yuan per half kilo shrimp they sold, they earn only 1.8 yuan, while giving away a large portion of their income to feed companies, shrimp, post-larva providers, pharmaceutical companies, and agricultural machinery companies. Also, the household production violate the rule of eco-regulation when in the reform era, the enforcement of settler herding degraded land. Also, we have the de-skilling of peasants with the adoption of input commodities. Next, I will introduce two cases of eco-socialism in the recent decade. First is the Gacuo commune in Tibet. So the Gacuo commune was established in 1976. In 1984, a lot of areas in Tibet and other places in China began to enforce decollectivization. However, in Gacuo, 70% of the members voted for the continuation of collectivization because they realized that household herding was vulnerable in confronting natural disasters. Now they have 125 households. Here are some of their practices. First, they do planning for production at the commune level. they allow for only 50,000 sheep for herding, much lower than the carrying capacity of 210,000 sheep. They institute strict rotating grazing schedules to protect the grasslands. Also, the herders maintain their traditional treatment of stock. There is a saying, regard the commune as my home and sheep as my sons. They also set up a leather and fur processing workshop to increase the herders' income. They also do planning at the production team level. So each production team is actually a laboring cooperative. They fulfill the production quota for meat and yogurt. And also the commune set up a special production team to supervise feeble goats. The production team also developed a precise system of work points by adhering to principles of distribution according to labor as well as proportionate labor. Finally, distribution and sales. The Gazuo commune prioritized on satisfying internal needs when 70% of the products served local community demand. Also, they have received much higher income than the average in the Nachi city. The commune can allocate some of its funds to provide social services like retirement pension, medical insurance, and incentive for teenagers to receive compulsory education. So there are no dropouts among the 131 students. The second case is Farmers Cooperative in Xinxin Village in Harbin. So this village, the incentive for this village to set up a cooperative is that it is a village composed of Korean ethnic minorities located in northeast China. In 2000s, a lot of villagers went to Korea because they were issued the working visa. So they went to Korea to do migrant work. The village soon became a hollow village with deserted land. In 2009, the village party secretary Kim decided to revitalize agriculture. He set up the cooperative to consolidate land before transferring use rights to the Han farmers in the nearby village. Kim was trained as an agronomist in the era of the People's Commune. Therefore, he recognized the advantage of cooperative production. So he wanted to promote ecological rice production to enter the niche market of organic food. The cooperative offers agricultural extension services. We also see the growth of the cooperative with more households joining. They offer agricultural extension services. The commune set up a seed trial field, and they did trials for different seed varieties. So the cooperative members, in summer each year, they can go to the field and select seeds. So among the 10 plus varieties, they could observe the one with trace of no lodging, no rice blast, etc. Previously, farmers, they either could only listen to the seed company's sales representative or just observe their neighbors. A household does not have the ability to do seed trial production. The cooperative also set up facility for improving germination and seedling. Because the village is located at altitude 45 degrees north, so it's still freezing in the spring season. Therefore, the cooperative set up a workshop for accelerating germination and also a greenhouse for rice seedling. Members can use these facilities free of charge. Then the cooperative also own agricultural machines. They have 123 agricultural machines. They also run a team of machine operators and maintenance technicians. They received very good training, so that saved the price of maintenance. Therefore, with these machineries, the members can expand their area of production. With the profit, the cooperative source of income come from three ways. First is land transfer fees, then seeds and seedling sales, and machinery service. they distributed 60% of the profit among members. They saved 10% for accumulation and used 10% for public service. Okay. Finally, discussion. So in this talk, I want to argue that we cannot romance the advantage of small peasants. Instead, we saw the plight of small peasants and the urgent need for collectivization. And collectivization is a way to achieve eco-socialism. Here, the cases that I discussed show how they, through collectivization, farmers can overcome the metabolic rift. In the case of Gacuo, the commune prioritized on internal consumption, and also they set up a work point system of distribution according to labor and labor proportionate principles. Also, the commune offers social services to members. For Xinxin village, the seed trial field increased farmers' knowledge of seeds. So that's a reskilling process against the metabolic rift. Agricultural machinery service help members expand their production area. And also applying the principle of eco-regulation. In Gacuo, the production planning limit the number of sheep to achieve ecological sustainability. They also apply traditional treatment of animals. In Xinxin village, germination and seedling workshop reduce the uncertainty of nature. So again, I want to emphasize that small farmers need to collectivize to overcome the problems associated with family agriculture. Okay, that's it for my talk. Hello? Hello?
Yes, thanks a lot. So we had a small delay here. Thanks a lot, Huang Yu, for your talk. It was very interesting and also very much on time.
Okay, good.
Great contribution. Thanks a lot. So we will already move to the next speaker, which will be Tomaz Mefano Fares.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
So you can hear me, right? Let me
yes.
share my slides. It's already here.
Yeah, I will just introduce you once again. So Tomaz will speak about state-capital relations and power struggle in China's globalized soybean complex.
Exactly. All right, so let me share here, share my presentation. So can you see my presentation? Can you visualize it?
Yes, it's there. Perfect.
It's there, right?
Yeah, we can see your screen.
Sure, okay.
Okay,
Let
great.
me just count 15 minutes here. All right. Okay,
so yours. Advice here in the private chat when your time is coming.
Okay, great. So yes, my presentation is based pretty much on what I've been studying during my PhD that has just come to an end. And now I'm gonna speak a little bit of my findings during this 5 years process that finished last year. I'm analyzing the main agribusiness companies in China's soybean complex, downstream complex, which is related to trading and processors, soybean processors. And most of them have some relations with Brazil by investing in Brazil or buying raw soybean from Brazil. So it's pretty much in line with the idea of the event about linking, finding the links between China, Brazil, and agribusiness and family farming. So let's look now at the agribusiness side, right? When we are looking at it, I'm actually establishing a dialogue with some literature that already exists about the Chinese state. So part of the literature recognizes contradiction here of China's political economy that has been navigating through a so-called neoliberal transition and state capitalism, which is a state that has been pushing forward some neoliberal-looking reforms, creating a labor market, and privatizing small and medium SOEs since the 1990s, and assessing the WTO and abiding by world free trade regulations and so on. And at the same time, we can see China providing an alternative to global neoliberalism through a developmentalist agenda based on a strong state intervention that some would call a social statist alternative. When it comes to food regime analysis, or generally speaking to agricultural analysis, we can see that China has been integrating into the global food system through also kind of a paradoxical way, contradictory way, which combines free trade and investments by integrating Chinese companies into a global trade, but at the same time providing a territorialized approach that includes protectionist policies towards imports, but at the same time encouraging the imports of feed crops through controlling global supply and global pricing. So this contradictory integration, global agribusiness integration, according to my findings, I see that it is the result of uneven and combined capitalist development. And it is also the result of the diverse state-capital relations in China. This is only the result of state-capital relations. It is not the means per se. So what are the means? What are the state-capital relations? And what is this type of uneven and combined development when we talk about, for example, the Chinese soybean downstream complex? So I've been, by looking at the main enterprises, we can see actually that they have different trajectories, entailing different accumulation strategies and different relations with the state. Let's just look at the second, third, and fifth cases of groups of enterprises, which I call fractions of the capitalist class in China. So the second, for example, comes from the corporate reforms since the 1990s, in which executives of big agribusiness companies have been able to accumulate wealth through super salaries, multiple corporate positions, ownership shares, investments, maybe through their family members or even themselves in private businesses. The second type would be the so-called insider privatization, in which former state officials have taken control over privatized companies. And the last one, let's go quickly because there are too many slides. It's the same process, but related to state officials and SOEs executives that have been investing in association with foreign capital, with foreign agribusiness enterprises. And if we look at different periods, we can see that in the soybean complex, different enterprises have been able to influence more or less in state policies. For example, starting in the early 1990s with soybean liberalization, we can see that it had benefited transnational corporations, the so-called ABCD. And then later on, state-owned agribusiness enterprises have taken control. In the mid-2000s, COFCO, which is the last group I was talking about, which is the an SOE that has been growing through association with foreign capital, has taken control, and goes until now. What is happening now is that, as we see, COFCO, this enterprise, has become the most the prominent one, that it has been able to grow through mergers and acquisitions. It has established global operations. It has acquired the Hong Kong-based Noble Agri and the Dutch-based Nidera. And since Xi Jinping administration, since 2013 at least, we can see that COFCO has experienced a rapid growth. Whereas in 2013, COFCO was almost the same size as Sinograin in Beidahuang. Now COFCO has grown a lot. And in the soybean processing industry, if you take a look, COFCO has also grown its processing capacity. Okay, what does COFCO's global integration and growth means to what I was talking about, state capital relations in the soybean complex? To talk about that, first let's review in 1 minute what has the literature talked about this. There are some authors out there that argue that as China integrates into the global economy, it's the rivalry between groups, the internal power contradictions in China has also become more intensified. With some capitalist groups have been more connected to the US financial market, and some others being more upholding a stronger state intervention through Xi Jinping government. But in what I've found in the soybean downstream complex, at least, is that COFCO, as COFCO grows, we can see that actually COFCO has a very different form of accumulation, which is it's completely it's a big contrast with the other enterprises in the sector. For example, if we look at the ownership of COFCO in the soybean processing sector, we can see that whereas Sinograin, Hopeful, which is a private-led enterprise, and Zhoushan, which is the subsidiary of Beidahuang, a big state-owned enterprise. These companies, for example, they have been based pretty much on their parent company's shares and state investors, or even in Chinese private investors, whereas COFCO has been based in offshore firms and sometimes even in direct foreign association. COFCO is actually pretty much also based on, as I was saying, is based on remote locations. It has more than 100 subsidiaries in tax havens. It has 62 subsidiaries in Hong Kong, in which it also enjoys flexible flow of capital, softer tax policies, less transparent ownership rights. COFCO International, which has been responsible for the acquisition of Nidera and Noble, is actually a multinational investment company in association with the Chinese arm of Goldman Sachs, World Bank, Singaporean state Temasek. COFCO has grown since the 1990s through a large amount of borrowing from foreign banks, issuing short-term commercial papers in the US and in Hong Kong. It has been mostly based or listed in Hong Kong stock exchanges. It has a huge insurance, securities, and derivatives operations in China. And in the last few years, we can see that actually its financial business has grown way more than its productive business. For example, its futures profit margins have tripled. It's from the 2015 until 2019, whereas the food manufacturing and sales income have actually shrunk, have become less and less important for COFCO. Actually, we also see that this is not only an economic trend, but it's also related to a political, it is a political option. It is a political choice that SASAC, for example, SASAC State Council has actually promoted those mergers and acquisitions despite disputes with Sinograin, because Sinograin was also interested, its executives were interested in some mergers and acquisitions that COFCO took the lead. And some of the COFCO's rivals have been clamped down by corruption campaigns. COFCO has been able to assign its senior executives in Sinograin, and COFCO has actually received a large amount of state subsidies that were decreasing from 2010, and from 2013 onwards, it became to increase again. So what does this tell about China's integration into the global economy, global agribusiness? Actually, we see that through COFCO, China has been able to attract, acquire, and assemble financial capital overseas. And through COFCO's form of integration, China has also been able to create an alternative to the Chicago Board of Trade by investing, for example, through COFCO in the Dalian Commodity Exchange. China has been able through COFCO to integrate into global finance in a very proactive way. What does this tell about the power relations at home then? Well, we can see that COFCO, with COFCO's rise and political choice for COFCO's rise, we can see changing policies at home. So, for example, since 2014, China has replaced its subsidies policies towards a voluntary formation of soybean selling prices, and China has been pushing forward an insurance and futures pilot program since 2014, among many other practices. However, we can also see that this comes with the adaptation and reaction of its rivals. As I was talking before, the paradox, the contradictions of China's integration into the global economy is related to state capital relations. And we can see this in the agribusiness, as we look at the reaction of its rivals. For example, with a very proactive political agenda of Beidahong and northeastern states, China has been creating specialized zones for soybean farming. In Heilongjiang, the province that produces the most of soybean, China has actually prohibited genetically imported soybeans to be processed and grown in China, which are the genetically modified soybeans, and it has pushed forward a more nationalist discourse through food security. Well, I hope that this way I could provide a more nuanced analysis of what is this type of contradiction that we see in China's global agribusiness integration. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Tomaz. So that was also pretty much on time and also pretty interesting. And I see how we can see how this relations between the state and various capital groups in China play out, and also external strategies. Very interesting for me to understand the relation between the two sectors. And now we have a closer look at Brazil to complete the picture with the contribution by Sérgio Sauer. Sérgio, thanks a lot for being here and joining us. And Sérgio will talk about land grabbing and small farmers in Mato Piba.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Jörg, for setting this session. It has been very interesting so far. So really thanks for this session, for the opportunity. I tried to share my presentation, but my computer is saying no. So if Carla could share for us, be nice. We are colleagues here at the University of Brasília, but it's really good to have the opportunity to participate and listen to Tomaz' research and also Professor Johan's studies and research in China. I'm thinking to, let's say, put up some information and some discussion from, let's say, the Brazilian perspective in this land grabbing, small farmers and eco Marxism, but also extractivism and agrarian or agriculture frontier and so on. So I will, let's say, if we think in terms of Brazil-China, China-Brazil relations, I will add some discussion, some points, some questions related to, let's say, the Brazilian perspective. Always thinking that it's not isolated, but it's in a geopolitical perspective or economic and a global perspective. It's always a process of states, but also capital relations, right? And so Jörg, are you able, or Carla, are you able to share?
Carla is trying to share the screen because I also couldn't do it here, but I think she's working on it.
Okay. For some reason, my computer is saying, no, you cannot share. Probably it's saying I'm not having very important things to say, but anyway, I'm trying. It's just because I set up a couple maps. So when we're talking about agriculture frontier in Brazil, or the so-called Mato Piba, 4 states territory, where and what about are we talking about? I'm not gonna go to too many let's say details in terms of territorial characteristics or production and material, just to give you a sense what we are talking about. I already started, so then I kind of add a couple concepts. So please, next slide. Let me see. No, I can't. I had to. So one of the things, I do believe in terms of a conceptual perspective, extractivism, or yes, this one. Thank you, Carla. In this debate on land grabbing and, let's say, the capitalist exploitation accumulation in rural development, like to use, I think this extractivism is a key concept. I'm not gonna do much, but why recently in Brazil, but mainly in Latin America, we are using this notion for like I want to say as an interpretation or interpretative, or a concept that puts up or put on the table what is going on in terms of capitalist accumulation and exploitation in Brazil and Latin America, because we do believe it's a modality of capital accumulation based on overexploiting natural resources, including soil, and also the results differently from idea of a capitalist exploitation that builds something or result or over result in goods. The notion of extractivism is that it's overexploitation is related to control or in over control and accumulation of natural resources, and the result is not wealth in a capitalist or capital perspective, but depletion. So exhaustion of these natural resources. So that's one concept that is very important when we look into the agrarian issues or rural development or even land grab. Próximo slides, Carla, or next slides. Okay. So this this extractivism has a rural or agriculture or agrarian perspective. That is this exhausting or this extraction of natural resources is also related to agriculture and livestock production. Or what I'm going to say here is that it's not just related to mining. It's not just related to natural resources in terms of oil, minerals, but also related to, let's say, agriculture production. That means I'm using the concept of agrarian extractivism to differentiate or to oppose or to make a different theoretical conceptual point, and is not related to industrial agriculture or modern agriculture or green revolution agriculture being based on industry, because our concept of industry is that industry is creative even in a capitalist perspective. So extractivism is not a human creative activity, but is a destructive activity. That's my point. We can debate later on. And then some capitalist activities or investments like land grabbing, green grabbing, it's a part of this extractive capitalism that is based on, like I said, in accumulation in one, concentration in another one of wealth, but also in depletion of the depletion, exhaustion of land, forest, water, and any other, let's say, natural resource. Right? So then, when we're talking about land and green grabbing, even though if there is a greeny narrative, to save a forest for conservation, a lot of times it's just a speculative investment, means it's not being depleted now, but will be in the near future, because that's the logic of capitalist exploitation, not to renew, but to exhaust the natural resources. And why I'm saying all this, because mainly the the dominant or the hegemonic agricultural production in Brazil is based on this extractive logic. Okay, next slide, and then próximo, Carla. Next one, this is the distribution of land use in Brazil. I'm not going to get into that. I'm just going to quickly go. I think the next one is Matopiba, this particular region. Próximo, Carla. It's land concentration, part of land grabbing and agrarian extractivism. I'm not going to go into that. Next one, próximo, Carla. Okay, just a minute, segundo neste. This, when we're talking about agriculture frontier, is very common that we use or think nationally, internationally, the rainforest, the Amazon. It's very important. But when we're talking about agriculture frontier, most recently, we're talking about another territory, another biome, which is the Cerrado biome, that is in this map. It's the second largest Brazilian biome and is the territory that is the largest agriculture frontier. Mainly being suffering changes on land use, turning down the forest, the savanna, the different ecosystems into monocrops and or pasture for cattle raising. So that's we talking about when we're talking about this Matopiba region or Cerrado biome. Carla, próximo. And so this Cerrado biome is its northern territory. It's a very large region. It's like almost it's like 4 or 5 countries in Europe, or a lot of land, around 70 million hectares of land, being the most used territory for the expansion of monocrops, mainly soy. What's important? Because it's the basis for the production that Tomaz was talking to us, or Johan was talking in the beginning, in terms of producing mainly soy, but also other production like iron ore, and mostly being for exportation, not only to China but also to Europe. So that's newest and largest agriculture frontier at the moment in the world, actually, but let's say in Brazil at least. Próximo, Carla. And so then, and why? And then it's also very important what Tomaz was telling us in terms of private investments, capitalist investments, corporations investments, and public or state investments, or support for the expansion of the agriculture frontier, or this agrarian extractivism. Okay, so at least there are 5 reasons, motivations, financial and political reasons why Matopiba has been recently the main land for exploited land for monocrops, soy in particular. One, it's because there is, between brackets, available land, because it's not an empty territory. it's not land that's not being used, but is being changed because of private investments and a lot of, because the land is still cheaper in relative terms if we compare to central part of Brazil or southern part, or even some states in the Cerrado, but like Mato Grosso. That's one reason. Second, it's very important, and there is a lot of state motivation or state support. There is available resources, particular cheap credit, and also agriculture research. The third reason is that has been in the recent past last decade or so a lot of public investment in infrastructure, particularly roads and ports, to export this soya, iron ore, and other natural resources from this region, because it's crucial. You need land, of course, but also you need means to export, to take these natural resources out of there and to export or to send to someplace else. So then the investments on building roads and ports and energy is very important, and that's the third factor. The fourth factor, as you may see in this map, the location. So we could say geopolitical reason. So this territory is closer to northern ports in Brazil, but it also the Panama Canal to ship soya to China, or to the Rotterdam port, the main entrance of soya in Europe. So then the fourth reason would be the location in the northern part of Brazil. It's so there's a lot of saving in terms of time and transportation cost to cultivate and produce soya in this region. And the last, and that's the reason why the last, for some, of course, there's another reasons, but also fifth reason for why Mato Piba is being targeted for investments in terms of land grabbing, green grabbing, or expansion of agriculture frontier is that the Brazilian national environmental regulation are kind of more flexible. I don't have time to explain all, but if you buy land in the Amazon, private property, like 100 hectares, 80% of that land must preserve or conserve the native rainforest. In the Cerrado, in Mato Piba region in particular, only 20% must be preserved or conserved. So 80% in the Amazon, 20% in the Cerrado biome. So there are others environmental regulations that are more flexible, but it's just one example how in terms of environmental protection, environmental conservation, Cerrado has been what some people some researchers are calling the sacrifice zone, meaning so we will preserve the Amazon or some other sensitive ecological sites, but Cerrado is available for monocrops, for changes in land use, deforestation, and so on. Okay, so that's the reasons why this agrarian extractivism is being put forward, particularly in this region, mainly, like I said, for soya production for exporting. Carlo, próximo. I'm not gonna. So that's you can see in the PowerPoint. I had like 3 overlapping maps. We could see the evolution or the expansion of soya cultivation from the south towards this Matopiba territory. This is a third map and shows how is the hectares are increasing in the region. My time is already over. Just last slides to give one, let's say, consequence. O próximo slide, Carla, and I promising that I'm finishing my presentation. So this is the deforestation, or the extraction, depletion of the native forest, or Cerrado native forest, to give room for the monocrops, or for the mining extraction in this region. Okay, so these are three different maps in 90s, 2000, and 2020, and you see it's becoming more and more red, not because we are, but because it's showing that the deforestation is really growing. So just to conclude, and mainly the idea is that with the agrarian extractivism, you have an accumulation of wealth, clearly, and the most of this wealth is not staying in the region. So that means there is a depletion of nature, forest, land, soil erosion, and so on. And also there is empower the local communities. Small farmers are losing their land, or becoming poorer and poorer and poorer. That's it for now. We can come back to some of those things in the discussion. Thank you, York.
So, thanks a lot, Sérgio. That was very insightful, very interesting, and I think we can also, I just want to add, like, there's a lot of focus on the Amazon in the last years in the international attention, but there are also other parts of Brazil, and the Cerrado as another large ecosystem is as important to the climate as is the Amazon. So the Amazon doesn't work if the Cerrado doesn't will disappear. So I think that's very important, just like also to include this region, because in the environmental regulations of the EU, the Cerrado was explicitly excluded and the Amazon was included. So this is a kind of bit selective treatment. So it's very important to put the focus on this region. Yeah, thanks a lot. So we already have 2 questions and 1 commentary, which I would read here. I think we go piece by piece. I read the first question, which I think is to Huang Yu, and the question was made by Long Yu Ao, saying, when assessing the Chinese commune and household farming, one must ask, in relation to the commune, how far it respected the will of the households themselves. Without asking this question, it would lead to errors. So maybe you can provide some insight on that issue.
Okay. So this question, I'm not a historian, but I have read some literature. The communes began.
Yeah, I think we have a small delay. Hoping for Huang Yu to come back soon.
Her connection is...
Yeah, luckily enough, it was working just fine until now, but which is already an exception. Okay, maybe I will just use the time for Huang Yu to come back and read the second question by Barbara Wieder, which I think can go both to Tomaz and to Sérgio. Qual é a importância das empresas chinesas na exportação de soja brasileira? What is the relevance of Chinese companies for the export of Brazilian soy? So maybe, Tomaz, you want to say something first, and then also Sérgio, you can also comment on this, if you like.
Okay. So as we can see, COFCO, and of course, COFCO is the biggest enterprise operating in Brazil after acquiring the big multinational Nidera and Noble. After that, COFCO became the third largest soybean exporter in Brazil, controlling around 15% of soybean exports from Brazil to the world. And it's the biggest soybean importer in China as well. And COFCO, so some would say that COFCO has grown very rapidly because it actually acquires soybean directly from producers. And when it acquires soybeans directly from producers, it acquires actually, it purchases soybean with prices that go above the market prices. So some would say, for example, John Wilkinson, a very well-known and very good scholar, he has been arguing that this is more than market strategy. This is a strategy that goes beyond market interests, that goes beyond profits, because it actually meets the interests of the domestic demand in China. Some others would say that actually COFCO is focusing a lot on raw soybean imports. And it's actually, McKay and other scholars would argue that this is a resource control strategy, that COFCO imports soybean from Brazil in order to preserve and make its processing industry more competitive in the global market. So it's a type of investment in Brazil that is actually mostly focused on raw soybean. I do agree to a certain extent to these two approaches, though I think that COFCO actually invests in processing. If we look at this, the processing capacity of COFCO, 1/3 of it is based overseas. And COFCO also purchases soybean in Brazil with higher prices. We have to admit that this is also a very aggressive expansion strategy. It's not only to meet its domestic demand, but it's also a strategy to grow and to bypass its foreign rivals. And also, COFCO invests to a certain extent in futures markets and has some interest in price speculation mechanisms. So it's not only a type of investment based on the domestic market, but it actually gains profits by reproducing the same practices of the transnational agribusiness through price speculation. It also reproduces the same operation and management mechanisms as it preserves the structures of operation and management of its acquired enterprises. So COFCO has acquired Noble and Agri, and COFCO has maintained kind of the same operation and mechanism and management strategies. So I think we have to. I don't think COFCO brings too many new things to the game. It is different from the others, but we have to ponderate to what extent this difference is.
Mm-hmm. Thanks a lot, Tomaz. I don't know, Sérgio, you
on this? A couple sentences. I think I generally agree with what was Tomaz saying, but it's important, I think, to point out that we were talking about soya production, but also pasture. I will come back to that in a moment. We can't say, well, the problem is China. because Brazil, of course, is exporting around 60% of soy production to China, but China is not the only consumer one. That's why I mentioned Europe is still consuming a lot, but the whole system it's related, but my emphasis was based on the concentration of production. That's one thing that we can't avoid or take out of the picture. So the whole thing, and second, we have to be careful. We're talking about the problem, social, economic, and environmental problems of monocrops, but not necessarily. It's not soya the problem, but the monocrops and this extensive way of doing, and then concentration. And then when we're talking about concentration, we're talking about only production, but who holds the outcome or the products or the commodity, right? And then, like Thomas said, COFCO is the third company, but we have another multinationals that the traders that are controlling, and they are profiting from the whole thing. And the third comment I want to make, someone comment on the YouTube that pasture is criminal. It's true, but again, if we think in terms of socioeconomic system on extensive pasture, because you have to remember the small farmers in the Amazon, in Cerrado, in whole Brazil, Latin America, they are raising cattle and so on, but it's not extensive and not in very large area or land. In the case of Cerrado, different from the Amazon, that's something is we used to say that the cattle raising, the cattle ranges or pasture were has been the main reason for deforestation in the Amazon. But in Cerrado is a bit different. The main reason for deforestation is monocrops. So then it's something that we have to be careful. And one of the economy basis of the small producers, the small farmers, local communities, traditional communities, even some indigenous communities in Cerrado, is to raise cattle, or small animals in different, of course, system of production. And the third point I'll make clear when we're talking about agrarian extractivism, a lot of times the so-called investments or appropriation of land and nature is for a speculative purpose. So it doesn't result in production. It's just speculative to what we called in the political economy as a rentist capitalism. So there's appropriation of nature, of wealth, of land, with no outcomes, with no production, and that's also very destructive in terms of a eco-socialism or a more sustainable, productive system that is not so uneven like Brazilian system of land distribution. That's it.
Thanks a lot, Sérgio. So we'll go back to Huang Yu, who was being asked how far the will of the households was respected in the peasant commune. More historical question. You were just starting to respond, and then the connection was down. But we're glad you're back again to be able to respond.
Right. So in responding to this question, historical documents have shown that usually in poorer areas or in poorer households, the incentive to cooperatize was greater because no family had their own cattle or tools. Therefore, through cooperatization, they could share tools or they could share tools or farm animals. Therefore, usually the richer farmers did not want to cooperatize because they could just hire farm labor rather than doing the exchange labor. However, the Chinese party really wanted to push for cooperatization because after the land reform, farmers returned to household farming. And for example, in the province of Shanxi, there was a growth of land sales and land concentration because of the existence of private property. So we saw the growth of two. We saw the polarization in the countryside, with some farmers becoming rich farmers and some poor farmers going bankrupt. So that was the idea of cooperativization proposed by the Shanxi government and then later promoted throughout the country. So I think we need to understand the reason for cooperativization was more for class leveling and for ending the land sales after land reform. And of course, the commune did not respect household production because it was intended to eliminate household production. But we also need to understand which kind of households welcome collectivization and which kind of households resisted. Okay, that's my answer.
Thanks a lot, Yu. There's one comment which I will read, which is not a question, from Carla Diaz Caetano. Muito agressiva a expansão da soja e das pastagens no território que compreende Mato Piba, danosa principalmente à biodiversidade brasileira. So the expansion of soy and of pastures in the territory of Mato Piba is very aggressive, and it's mainly damaging to the Brazilian biodiversity. And also, Tomaz was sending us a question, but Tomaz, you can also just formulate it yourself.
Yeah, so there are few studies on to what extent the imports of monoculture production, highly specialized production from Brazil affects small farming or household farming in China and speeds up the process of commodification of labor and land and concentration of production in China. So if Huang Yu would like to say something about this, would be interesting. Exactly to what extent soybean imports from Brazil affect farming in China.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks for the question. Actually, I think Yan Hairong is more positioned to answer this question than me, because she researched the soybean farmers in Northeast China. So traditionally, the Northeast China, including like Heilongjiang, Jilin, and Liaoning, these kind of provinces are the soybean production areas. And I think China started the soybean import from 1996, and then the imports got accelerated after year 2001 when China joined the WTO, and since then the soybean export has grown exponentially. Basically, domestic soybean production is very small. I believe that if I don't remember wrong, like domestic soybean provision is less than 15%. So while we have, I remember 88, close to 90% of the soybeans are from imports. However, it's interesting that we rarely see any resistance or protest by these formerly soybean producers because they switch to other crops. For example, in Heilongjiang, a lot of farmers either switch to rice or corn production. So and some go to the cities to migrant work. So I think because of the option to grow other crops and also the option of working in the manufacturing sector, therefore we rarely see any protest of soybean farmers. That's my question. But I also have a question for you, Thomas. You mentioned that because in Heilongjiang they issue a policy to prohibit the GMO cultivation. However, if you follow up with the news, this year, in the last 2 years, the Chinese government seemed to be loosening up the GMO restriction. So now they allow, they have offered what's called the security, the biological. They have offered the permit, the production permit to some companies, especially 大北农. So do you think that these agribusinesses impact has any will affect the GMO policy in China? Because you mentioned because Beidahuang is in Heilongjiang, that's why the government banned the GMO cultivation. But now they are backing up the 大北农, which is based in Beijing. So what do you see the future of GMO regulation policies in China?
Can I answer?
Yeah.
I think that is the trend, yeah, because before, for example, in 2016, a couple of years ago, Heilongjiang food safety regulations prohibited cultivation and processing of genetically modified soybean, corn, and rice, which was a major main blow against, of course, imports or even imports in general, yeah, of soybean. And this was actually ratified by Heilongjiang provincial government in 2017. I think the middle ground between this kind of dispute over to what extent China can process imported soybeans is being solved by Chinese own technological advance in soybean in GMO production. Yeah, so 大北农 is a Chinese company, and it's been investing in GM technology, yeah, to produce Chinese own GMs. So I think the tendency is to see this kind of solutions based on a food security, nationalist food security discourse, in which China can integrate into the global economy, can import GM soybean, but also can benefit from it, and it benefits from it by creating capturing parts of the profits of GM investment and production.
Sergio, yes, you can ask.
Let me jump in this discussion in terms of Brazil-China commercial relations. I think it's very important that we look at in two ways relationship. Of course, there's a lot of considering in geopolitical terms of political economy, considering China as a giant in terms of second world largest economy, right? And then Brazil, there is a lot of discussion and studies if this commercial relationship is becoming or transforming Brazil in a new dependency relation. That's an open question related to that. But what I'm saying is that, and I think there is a lot of dependency, particularly China demand, like for soya, is one of the, let's say, the economic driver for expanding the soya production, right? And when I think I'm saying soya production and make Brazil internally a very dependent, actual capture by the large agribusiness and all this very, very large monocrops and enterprise. That's one thing. And because if you don't, that's one thing. But also, there is influences that Brazilian influence and internally, according to Schneider, and Phil McMichael, the import of soya from Brazil, not from Brazil, from South America, because this soy nation that includes Argentina, Paraguay, even Bolivia, Uruguay as soya producers. The production and importation in China, it's making possible the existence or the expansion of the very large pig farms, and that has impact on terms of small scale production or pig production, right? And according to their studies, and these very large pig farms are only possible because the importation of soya from South America, Brazil in particular, but also Argentina and other countries like I mentioned. That's one reason, and that driving to what Mindy Schneider critically says mythification, of Chinese diet. So just example, it would need. I don't have a lot more information to overstate that, but I think it's a very interesting perspective to see how this relationship is not just only based on dependency or domination, but how it's mutually influenced in terms of changing local economy, impacting over small farming in China, but also in Brazil. And last point I want to make is that why we are insisting that we should look carefully environmentally, but also socially, economically to this biome called Cerrado. It's not because the Amazon is not important, like Jorg was saying, but in environmental terms, Cerrado is the main responsible for the water in Brazil, not the rain water or the rain season, but the three largest river basins are started in the Cerrado. So if you deplete or deforest Cerrado, because it's highland, flat highland, and most of the water spring born for these three largest, except with the Amazon basin, the other three very largest, even one of them running into the Prata basin, that means Argentina and Uruguay, are born in the Cerrado. So And what is happening with the deforestation, some of those water springs are going dry. They are not resisting to this depletion of the native forest in the Cerrado. So we're talking about very sensitive territory in terms of environmental resources, water, which is basic, including for agriculture production. Yeah, and one of the reasons is that's also becoming a social environmental problem is that Mato Piba is the largest territory of commercial irrigation or very large central pivot irrigation system that is really drawing out or sucking out the water, affecting local communities, small farming, indigenous communities, and so on. That's it. Yeah.
Thanks a lot, Sergio. So do we have any other questions? I don't think we have more questions in the YouTube chat or from the participants. If not, then I would have a question which maybe goes a bit more to you and Tomaz. So I was wondering if there's some debate in China about substituting agricultural imports, which come, for example, from Brazil or from other countries, with a domestic production in China? Or is that rather not a debate due to maybe to the lack of arable land, or maybe because the switch to other crops necessitates that this production is upheld?
Okay. Should I start?
Whoever wants to start.
Okay. So yes, we have to differentiate the type of production that we have in Chinese northeastern bases of production of soybean with those that are imported. So those that are produced in China, northeast China, they are mainly focused on soy food production, tofu, any kind of food production that doesn't, that according to the Chinese law regulations, it should be used by processing non-GM soybeans. And also, so this is a way of protecting the northeastern region, as it doesn't compete with soybean imports that are GM soybean. So these imported soybeans, they go mainly to animal feed industry, to processing, crushing, and also oil, soybean oil, which can be GM or non-GM production. So the government protects the northeastern region by making this division of what GM soybean can be produced or not. As also coming back to the question that Huang Yu made, this is as China invests in GM soybean through Dabenon and other enterprises, and as it loses this regulation, I'm just complementing the other question, which is to say that maybe this is a clue for us to see that actually Chinese agribusiness, or northeastern Chinese agribusiness, is confident that it should be, or is actually it's confident that it should be competing globally. So it should be also producing and processing GM soybeans, and that it should be that it's not that is not divided, that is not separate from the global imports. Another thing is that China pays a big attention to import diversification. So it invests a lot in South American soybean, as an alternative to North American soybean in production and imports. Therefore, China becomes less reliant on the US soybean provision, because it diversifies, not only in South America, but in Africa, in Russia, and so on.
Thanks a lot, Tomaz. You want to respond to the question?
Right. Yes, I also agree with Thomas' opinion that with this green light giving to GMO soybean variety, actually these GM companies, they are saying with the production, with the cultivation of domestic GMO soybean, then we can reduce the reliance on imports. However, many Chinese people, consumers, are opposed GM production. So I don't think that this patriotic discourse can convince the Chinese residents. We still hope that we can really have GMO-free food, and we can consume more ecological food. So I don't think that many Chinese people support the domestication of GMO production, even though it is presented as a solution to reduce the reliance on imports.
Okay, that's quite interesting, I think. Yeah, we have no further questions here from the chat. I don't know if one of you wants to raise another one or make an additional comment. Not now. Yeah, I think we had a great debate, a great exchange, touching on a lot of aspects, and we see, I think, how these three pieces are fitting together nicely and also explain each other in some aspects. So I really enjoyed the debate. I also learned a lot. It's not my central area of research, but very relevant issues. Yeah, so thanks a lot, everybody, for participating. I think we all stay in touch, and yeah, thanks a lot, and have a good day, good evening, good afternoon.
Thank you for the opportunity. Nice to see you.
Thank you for having us.
Bye. Thank you.
Thanks for organizing the event.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
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 Thanks. Bye-bye.